you set a quota to hire X number of not white people. Basically a quota that says, do not hire more white people. Because the problem we've seen like this happen with Disney and everybody else, they already had a staff that was mostly white. And then in order to get 50% of their creatives or their writers, the only way you're going to do that is either you're waiting a very long time for the people you have now to basically disappear by attrition and then replace them, or they get passed over for promotions. They get terminated and then replaced. And this has been a problem at a lot of these places in a lot of different industries, not just Hollywood. Renegade Online. CBS settles with the white SEAL team staffer who claimed discrimination. So this has been ongoing for a while. Brian Beneker is a script coordinator who claimed that he'd been passed over for a writing job by Paramount CBS for the TV show SEAL Team because he's a straight white man. And apparently this has now been settled before it went to trial. Beneker alleged that CBS's diversity hiring goals, which previously published, well known just like Disney's, at the time included reaching 50% representation for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC, writers by 2022-2023, which amounted to, according to obviously his side of the story, an illegal quota. No terms of the settlement were disclosed. Paramount Global, the parent company of CBS, recently rolled back its diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, saying in a memo that it would no longer, quote, set or use aspirational numerical goals related to the race, ethnicity, sex, or gender of hires, which I find interesting. As it said, it basically won't say what the numbers are, but it doesn't say that we're not going to do it. It just says that we're not going to set an arbitrary number. And I think this is how they're trying to skirt discrimination issues. Beneker had the backing of America First Legal, advocacy group led by White House advisor Stephen Miller. The group has sought to invalidate DEI policies to the private sector. Paramount Global and CBS Studios have agreed to a settlement in a lawsuit America First Legal brought on behalf of our client, Brian Beneker. The group said in a statement, we are pleased to see that Paramount and CBS publicly back off of their DEI requirements and return to merit-based considerations. Diversity quotas that discriminate on the basis of race are unlawful. Others in the entertainment industry should take note. This is the fun part because, of course, the Disney issue is going to come up here. Paramount is currently seeking the Trump administration's approval of a merger with Skydance. Of course, we've been talking about this one. The Federal Communications Commission, or the FCC, is already investigating Paramount over the 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris, which they edited beyond recognition, if y'all remember this story, which Trump and his supporters claim was misleadingly edited. Oh, it absolutely was, because when the raw footage came out, it was night and day different.
I want to watch it now.
That investigation could interfere with FCC approval of the merger. Trump has also sued the company for $20 billion, which is hilarious, over the Harris interview. The FCC has also launched probes of DEI policies at Comcast Universal, the parent of NBC Universal and Disney. Beneker's lawsuit survived CBS's motion to dismiss. As Judge John Walter concluded, the company's objections would be more appropriate for a summary judgment motion rather than go that route, which would have involved depositions and other discovery, which these companies, especially like Disney, really don't like. The parties elected to settle following a mediation with a retired judge in December. They go into some other things that America First has been involved in. Here we go. But in another case, Disney has raised similar arguments to defend the firing of Gina Carano, to which what they're saying is CBS declined to comment. In its motion to dismiss, the company had argued that the First Amendment gives it a broad right to hire whomever it wants for creative roles. Sounds familiar, right? Disney.
Sounds racist.
The settlement leaves that the legal question unresolved, which is they probably don't want it resolved. Danny, I'll let you speak to this. But in another case, Disney has raised similar arguments to defend the firing of Gina Carano, the Mandalorian actor who was accused of trivializing the Holocaust in a social media post. She didn't. Carano filed a lawsuit alleging that she was illegally fired in retaliation for disfavored political activity, which, of course, is a special set of laws they have in California for that. U.S. District Judge Sherilyn Peace Garnett denied Disney's motion to dismiss last year, finding that the First Amendment does not provide a blanket defense, in this case to an entertainment company who uses the First Amendment as an excuse for everything that they do. That case, too, remains unresolved with the trial scheduled for February. So, Danny, put the lawyer hat on for a second here. You got this settlement here. CBS, obviously, they need to get the spotlight off of them for a multitude of reasons right now, none the least of which is the Skydance deal they really desperately need to go through, because otherwise Paramount, CBS are basically going bankrupt. The similarities here are interesting between Paramount, between Disney, same type of case as the First Amendment argument. You have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's twofold. I think that they're terrified of discovery, obviously. They don't want to go that route. It looks like this was brought in federal district court based on the order that I'm looking at from the judge. And reading between the lines in the order, it seems to appear that the judge really did not want to set a precedent that would be bad for this type of policy. And the judge is somewhat hinting at, look, if you brought this on a motion to dismiss, you would lose. And I don't want to be the one to do that. So maybe you should go another route. So it was kind of a hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I think you should try a different avenue. Whereas with Carano, you had her bringing her claims not under federal law, some under federal law, if I recall correctly, but some under California law and California legal protections.
Yeah, California.
So that I think the judge is a little more willing to work with. Here under federal law, if this judge had ruled the way that they should on a summary judgment motion, it would mean that straight white males in California could continue to bring these lawsuits successfully in federal district court, which would be bad for people who feel that that's not okay. So I think reading, again, just reading between the lines in the order, is somewhat hinted at that way. And then, of course, they don't want to deal with discovery. And frankly, it's cheaper to settle than it is to have to go into litigation. Interestingly, we've had similar cases with Google and engineers who felt discriminated against. But I think that times have changed. I think that the court's precedent has changed significantly ever since the doing away with other equity policies, the idea that schools can make racial-based discrimination calls in selecting the new students into their student body. So I think where you have this trickle-down effect, it's starting to affect the courts, and they're realizing, look, you guys, maybe bring this back under another administration, maybe with different judges, maybe a different climate. Maybe we could skirt around the law and try and find some sort of legal loophole to give you some relief. Maybe we dismiss, but then if they dismissed it at that level, it could be immediately appealed. And if the appeals court's signaling, hey, we're not okay with this form of discrimination, but the lower court is saying, I am, rather than go ahead and dismiss it outright and have it be challenged on appeal and have the appeals court agree with them, they would much rather just say, hey, look, parties, we're going to deny your motion to dismiss, and we're going to force you to go to discovery or settle.
Yeah, and sometimes I wonder, how many judges out there are just afraid to make waves. And sometimes maybe they just rather see, hey, what's the easiest way to take out here? Let's go do a settlement. I mean, and I don't know how much that really plays into some of these kind of cases, but difference between federal court versus, Gina Carano, who's suing Disney in California state court. Because again, that specific law in California that was created 60, 70 years ago, whatever the hell it was now, when they were hunting down commies in Hollywood. They had the state law that was made that was basically there to protect, if you have a political affiliation and, a company, in this case, a Hollywood studio or otherwise in California, can't terminate you based on your political viewpoint or which, seems like a rational, reasonable kind of thing. I guess in some instances, I still believe that a business has a right to associate with whomsoever they desire to, because it's a private company and they make those calls. But at the same time, there are specific things out there about racial discrimination in this case, which is what this one's about, different component than what that Gina is necessarily filing under the California law. But this is, the racial component of, you set a quota to hire X number of not white people. It's basically a quota that says, do not hire more white people. Because the problem we've seen like this happen with Disney and everybody else, they already had a staff that was mostly white. And then in order to get 50% of their creatives or their writers. The only way you're going to do that is either you're waiting a very long time for the people you have now to basically disappear by attrition and then replace them, or they get passed over for promotions, they get terminated and then replaced. And this has been a problem at a lot of these places in a lot of different industries, not just Hollywood. But
the big kicker, the big hint, without reading between the lines, the big hint that they really didn't want to overturn case precedent, and they felt that this case might be that type of case, is that Beneker was being backed by AFL and the White House. And their goal is specifically to invalidate DEI practices in the private sector. So if that law firm is looking at this case going, hey, wait a second, this might have some Supreme Court potential here. This might be a really good case to overturn case precedent. Let's go ahead and back this guy. I think that law firm was betting on the judge dismissing the case, allowing it to go to the appeals court, Federal Court of Appeals, having it again kicked down until it got up to the Supreme Court, and then having the Supreme Court ultimately agree that this is a form of discrimination in private industry that is legally impermissible. So that's why I say there's two reasons to assume that this is why the judge allowed this to continue, and this is why they settled this as quickly as they could, because they wanted to kill this case before it had those types of impacts in the law.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought about that. But then you kind of have to wonder, I mean, because if America's First Legal, if that was really their goal, and that makes a ton of sense, what you just said, wonder how much Paramount had to cut that check for to make them sawed off. I mean, that had to have been a big ass check. They have the money and the manpower to do it, to carry it up to the Supreme Court, like you said. They have the resource to sit on this case for a long time, because this would be a real jewel in the crown for them to get that done. So that check from Paramount must have been significant. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.